Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson, and this is not your episode for the week. It's an additional little supplemental one to accompany Pentamerone Episode 3. I missed something on the way through The Three Sisters, and I wanted to pop in with an extra comment. The part that struck me on a re-listen is this, quote, "This is not a fever that will yield to medicine and diet, much less are these ordinary wounds which require lint and oil, for the charm that was on the broken glass produces the same effect as onion juice does on the iron heads of arrows, which makes the wounds incurable. There is one thing only that could save his life, but don't ask me to tell you, for it is a thing of importance." End quote. The thing is the rendered fat of the ogre himself. I was surprised by this idea. Onions poison arrowheads. It's not a unique concept. People have wanted to make their projectiles more dangerous using whatever's about for a very long time. For example, there are stories of English archers urinating on the ground into which they've stuck their arrows to encourage sepsis. I'm surprised, though, that it was onions, because onions are used in precisely the opposite way in later periods. For example, during the American Civil War, oil of onions was used on burn wounds. It's mildly antibiotic, but back then, that was about as good as you were going to get, and onions can be carted about anywhere so long as you keep them dry. During the American Civil War, they had got to the point of not salving all wounds with unguents, so the use of onion oil on burns was an exception to the usual method of treatment. The odd thing was that if they needed to suture wounds, they would put a piece of onion into the wound before sewing, and then they would reopen it after a few days, because back then they believed in bottom-up healing for wounds. What they were hoping for was laudable pus, a sort of whitish-yellow pus that they saw as the leftover of the body's process of the digestion of ill humours in the wound. Since the time of the ancient Greeks, people have noticed that pus-filled wounds heal far better than those without pus, which are more likely to be fatal. Not pus-filled in this case, I would like to stress, doesn't mean superficial injuries, which are clean. I mean deep injuries, the tissues of which have necrotized. It seemed odd to me to have onions going the other way to make wounds not seal. For Magonomia, it does give me the idea for an alchemical preparation. I wouldn't make it a standard effect for raw onion juice, because otherwise every chef in Europe will eventually bleed out through their fingertips. In Ars Magica, you just make it a folk charm that duplicates the wound that weeps. So once again, this was not your episode for the week. It was just a little extra that occurred to me as I was listening to the copy that went live of Pentamerone 3. Working on Pentamerone 4 at the moment. My goodness, it's a long one. It's going to be at least 60 minutes. One of our longest episodes ever. For which I'd like to thank the Patreons, who are now completely covering the cost of running the podcast. Your saga may vary.